Shout at me again, and this ends. Harper's voice cracked through the diner like lightning. The billionaire froze, coffee dripping from his hand, pride shattering on the counter. Before we dive into this story, I need to know something. Have you ever stood your ground even when your whole body was shaking? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if you've ever believed that respect matters more than money, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. It was a gray Thursday morning in Maple Hill, Ohio, the kind of town where everyone knew each other's coffee order before sunrise. Harper Lane was wiping down the counter of Marty's diner, humming faintly to a country song on the old radio. The scent of bacon and burnt toast filled the air, mixing with the low chatter of regulars. She'd been on her feet since 5 a.m., wearing the same faded name tag she'd had for 3 years. Her smile was automatic, practiced, polite. "Morning, Harper," called out Jim, the mailman. "Hey, Jim," she said, pouring his usual black coffee. "Rough route today?" "Snow's worse than they said," he sighed. "Roads are slick as butter." She chuckled softly. "Be careful out there." Ordinary morning, until the door swung open. A man in a dark coat stepped inside, shaking snow from his shoulders. He looked out of place. Sleek watch, polished shoes, sharp jaw. His expression, cold, calculated. Harper didn't recognize him, but something about him carried weight, the kind of presence that made the air shift. He slid into a booth by the window without a word. When she approached with a notepad, he didn't look up. "Coffee," he muttered. "Black, and make it fast." She blinked, taken aback by the tone. "Sure thing." He tapped impatiently on the table. "And toast. Wheat, not white. Lightly buttered. Not too much jelly." Harper wrote it down, jaw tightening. "Got it." When she returned with his order, he glanced up for the first time, and she saw it. Exhaustion behind arrogance. Still, his words were sharp. "This is cold." "It's been on the table for 30 seconds, she said evenly. He exhaled, clearly irritated. "Do you always talk back to customers?" Harper's voice stayed calm. "Only when they forget I'm human." The diner went quiet. Even Jim looked up from his paper. The man set his cup down slowly. "Do you have any idea who I am?" She raised an eyebrow. "Doesn't matter." That's when he shouted. "It does matter." The sound sliced through the small space, and Harper's patience broke. She stepped forward, eyes steady. "Shout at me again, and this ends. You hear me?" He froze, not because she was loud, but because she meant it. The diner watched, waiting. For the first time in a long time, Julian Cross, the billionaire who owned half of downtown Cleveland, didn't know what to say. He looked around, then back at her, and something strange happened. His anger softened. "I'm sorry," he muttered. Harper blinked. "What?" "I said I'm sorry." He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes dropping to the floor. "It's been a long week." Her defenses faltered just a little. "We all have those." He nodded once, quiet now. "Guess I forgot how to talk to people." Harper sighed, pouring him a fresh cup. "Well, coffee's a good place to start." A small smile flickered at the corner of his mouth. "You're not fired?" She smirked. "You're not my boss." The tension in the room eased. The regulars went back to their meals. But Harper felt something she couldn't explain. A spark of curiosity beneath the frustration. And Julian? For the first time in months, he felt small in the best way. He didn't know why this waitress in a small-town diner could shake him like that. But he knew one thing: he'd be back tomorrow. Neither of them knew that one small moment of honesty would change both their lives. Forever. The next morning, the bell over the diner door jingled again. Harper didn't even have to look up. She knew that sound, the soft brush of expensive shoes on old linoleum. Julian Cross was back. He stood by the door, scanning the room. He wasn't wearing his coat this time, just a gray sweater and a look that didn't match his status. The cold edge from yesterday was gone, replaced by something almost unsure. Harper exhaled quietly and went back to refilling coffee cups. He sat down at the same booth. When she finally approached, pad in hand, he glanced up. "Morning," he said. Her eyebrows lifted. You sure you want me as your waitress? A hint of a smile tugged at his lips. Guess I like a challenge. She didn't laugh, but she didn't walk away either. Coffee? Please. The air between them felt different this time. Not sharp, but curious. The snow outside had stopped, and sunlight poured through the diner windows, glinting off the chrome napkin holder. As she poured his coffee, Julian watched her. She was efficient, no nonsense, the kind of person who carried her world quietly but with purpose. He wasn't used to that. He was used to boardrooms, to people who said yes before he even finished talking. He wasn't used to someone like her, someone who didn't care who he was. Listen, he started, about yesterday. Don't worry about it, she interrupted. I should worry about it. I was rude. She gave a small shrug. You were human. He looked at her, surprised. That's not what most people would call me. Then maybe you're around the wrong people. Her words hit harder than she meant them to. Julian blinked, letting out a quiet breath. For a moment, neither spoke. The diner hummed with low conversation and the crackle of bacon on the grill. Julian leaned back in his seat. Do you ever get tired of this? She frowned. Of what? The routine. Same faces, same walls. She thought for a second. Sometimes, but it's steady. Can't say that about much else. He nodded, glancing toward the window. Steady sounds nice. It was strange, hearing that from someone like him. The man probably lived in penthouses and traveled on private jets. What did he know about needing steady? Still, his tone was soft. Honest. What do you do? She asked finally. He hesitated. I run a company. She smirked. That narrows it down. Cross Technologies, he said quietly. Her hand froze on the coffee pot. That Cross Technologies? He nodded, almost embarrassed. Well, she said, setting the pot down. You weren't lying when you said you were used to people knowing your name. He chuckled lightly. Yeah, it's not as fun as it sounds. She tilted her head. You're the guy who built that self-driving car software, right? That's me. Didn't one of them crash last year? He flinched just a tiny bit. Yeah, someone got hurt. We're still dealing with that. The way his voice dipped told her more than he intended. Harper's tone softened. Sorry, didn't mean to bring that up. It's fine, he said quietly. I'm just not great at small talk. Well, she said, folding her arms. Good thing you found the one waitress in Ohio who'll talk to you like a normal person. He smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. The next few mornings, Julian came back. Same booth, same order. Sometimes they talked about silly things, old TV shows, the best pie flavors, how Ohio winters never really ended. Other times, silence filled the air, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. Still, the town had noticed. Who's the fancy guy? Marty, the owner, asked one night while Harper counted tips. Just a customer, she said. Marty smirked. He sure looks at you like more than that. She rolled her eyes. He's just someone who needed coffee and quiet. But she didn't entirely believe her own words. There was something about Julian that kept her curious. Not his money, not his fame, but the way he seemed lost even when he smiled. And deep down, Harper knew that kind of loss too well. One evening, Julian stayed later than usual. The diner was empty except for a few regulars lingering over pie. He pushed a folder across the table. You're good with people, he said. Thanks, I guess. No, I mean it. You see things. You read people before they speak. That's rare. She leaned on the counter. Why are you telling me this? I have a problem at work, he admitted. My team can't figure out why the last launch failed. But it's not the code. It's people. No one's talking. Everyone's scared of me. Harper tilted her head. Maybe they're not scared of you. Maybe they're scared of what you'll do if they're honest. He blinked. That's possible. She smiled faintly. Then start by listening instead of leading. Julian sat back, processing her words. It was advice he didn't expect to get from someone in an apron. Can I ask something? She said. Sure. Why are you really here? He hesitated. Because this is the only place where no one wants anything from me. Her chest tightened. She didn't say anything, but she understood. A few minutes later, she refilled his cup one last time for the night. "Julian," she said quietly, "whatever you're trying to fix out there, don't forget to fix yourself too." He looked up and their eyes met. For a second, neither of them moved. "Harper," he said softly, "you might be the first person who's ever said that to me." Before she could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced down, his expression darkened. She caught a glimpse of the screen. Cross-tech emergency. System failure. Julian stood up abruptly, grabbing his coat. "I have to go. Everything okay?" He hesitated. "Not yet, but maybe it will be." Then he was gone, leaving his untouched pie and a swirl of cold air behind him. That night, Harper wiped down the counter slowly. The diner was quiet again, but her mind wasn't. She didn't know if he'd be back, but for some reason she hoped he would. Because something told her this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the collision that would set everything in motion. If you've ever met someone who changed your day with just a few words, even when they didn't mean to, maybe the story's for you. Don't just watch. Stay. Because the next part might just remind you what second chances look like. But neither of them knew. This was only the beginning. 3 days passed. Harper kept glancing at the door every time the bell jingled. Each time it was just another regular. The mailman, a group of high school kids, or Mrs. Keller picking up pie for her husband. Never him. She told herself she didn't care. People like Julian didn't come back once they got what they needed. She'd seen it before. Men with smooth words and restless eyes. They always moved on. So she focused on her shifts. Coffee, plates, smiles, repeat. But sometimes, when she wiped down the counter, she caught herself thinking about the way he'd looked at her that last night. The kind of look that saw past the apron and tired eyes. And that bothered her more than she wanted to admit. Across town, in a tall glass building in downtown Cleveland, Julian Cross stood in front of a boardroom window, staring out at the gray skyline. His team spoke around him. Slides, numbers, updates. But their voices felt distant. He couldn't stop replaying her words in his head. Maybe they're not scared of you. Maybe they're scared of what you'll do if they're honest. It wasn't anger he felt. It was truth. He tried to bury himself in work, drowning in meetings and reports, pretending that conversation hadn't happened. But every time he walked into a room, he saw the flinch in people's eyes, the guarded tone, the silence after his questions. She'd been right. That waitress from Maple Hill saw what no one in his multimillion-dollar company could. The human side he'd forgotten existed. Still, he told himself it didn't matter. He didn't have time for distraction. He was here to fix what broke, not chase something that made him feel. He opened his laptop and typed Marty's Diner into his browser. His finger hovered over the address line. Then he shut it again. No, he couldn't. He had to move on. Saturday morning came with blue skies and melting snow. Harper woke up early, brewed a pot of coffee in her tiny kitchen, and sat by the window of her small apartment over the laundromat. Her son, Eli, was still asleep. She smiled at the sound of his soft breathing from the next room. Life wasn't easy, but it was steady, just like she'd told Julian. She took a sip of her coffee, staring at the clouds. For a second, she wondered what kind of morning he was having. Probably in some high-rise office, sipping imported espresso, forgetting all about the girl from the diner who told him off. "Good," she whispered. He should forget. But her chest tightened anyway. Later that day, Harper was restocking the pie case when Marty called from the kitchen. "Hey, Harp, you got a delivery here." She frowned. "I didn't order anything." He shrugged and slid a small box across the counter. A sleek white envelope was taped to the top. She wiped her hands on her apron and opened it. Inside was a note written in clean handwriting. "Thanks for the coffee and the honesty. You were right. Listening works better than shouting. Julian." Below it was a small, rectangular keycard. Cross Technologies Visitor Pass. Harper stared at it, her pulse quickening. He'd left an invitation. Not a request, not an apology, just a door. She closed the box quickly. "Must be some kind of joke," she said out loud, trying to steady her breath. Marty raised an eyebrow. "Something wrong?" She shook her head. "No, just nothing." But that night, when the diner lights went off and she lay in bed, the card sat on her nightstand, catching the glow of the streetlight. She told herself she'd throw it away in the morning. She didn't. Across town, Julian sat in his office long after everyone had gone home. He was tired, but for once it wasn't from work. He thought about her again. How unafraid she'd been, how quick she was to stand her ground. He'd met investors, politicians, CEOs. But she was the first person who made him want to listen. He didn't expect her to show up. He just needed to say thank you in his own way. Yet somewhere deep down he hoped she might. Monday morning rolled around. The diner was full, the smell of pancakes and syrup filling the air. Harper moved between tables, her smile automatic, until she glanced up and saw him again. Standing by the door. Same coat, same quiet look. Julian. He'd come back. She froze for half a second before walking over, calm as ever. "You lost again?" she asked, hiding her surprise. He smiled faintly. "Maybe a little." Marty, watching from behind the counter, smirked and muttered, "Here we go again." Julian slid into his booth. "I figured I owed you another tip for the advice." Harper poured his coffee. "Glad it worked." "It did," he said. "Things are different now." "That's so?" He nodded. "I stopped shouting." She raised an eyebrow. "And the world didn't fall apart?" "No, it actually got quieter." For a moment they both laughed, soft, real, the kind that fills the space between two people learning to breathe again. But just as quickly Harper pulled back. "You probably have better places to be, Mr. Cross." He looked at her, hurt flickering in his eyes. "You can just call me Julian." "Still sounds too fancy for this place," she said, picking up her tray. And just like that, she walked away. Julian sat there, staring at the empty cup. He didn't know what else to say. He'd thought coming back would feel easy, but it didn't. It felt like standing on the edge of something he couldn't name. He left a few bills on the table and walked out. Harper watched him go, pretending not to. Her chest ached in a way that made no sense. She told herself it was better this way. Lines were clear, worlds separate. He'd go back to his towers. She'd stay with her diner. But the truth was simple. Some people walk into your life and rearrange the silence. And no matter how hard you try to forget them, their voice stays. Pride is a liar. And theirs was about to cost them everything. It started with a phone call Harper never expected. She was on her lunch break behind the diner, sitting on the back steps with a cup of coffee when her cell buzzed. "Harper Lane?" a voice asked. "Speaking. This is Daniel Cruz, head of community relations for Cross Technologies." Her stomach flipped. "Okay. Mr. Cross recommended you for a short-term consulting role. We're launching a local initiative and need someone who understands people, especially the folks around Maple Hill." Harper blinked. "Wait, you want me? The waitress?" "Yes, ma'am," he said, his tone warm. "You'd be working directly with Mr. Cross for about 2 weeks. He said you have a way of making people honest." She stared out at the parking lot, stunned. Julian had done this. She should have said no. She had her diner job, her kid, her routine. But something in her whispered, maybe it's time for something different. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "Take your time," Daniel replied. "But we'd love to have you." 2 days later, Harper found herself walking into the glass lobby of Cross Technologies, her hands tightening around a borrowed blazer. Everything gleamed, floors, windows, even the plants looked expensive. She felt like she didn't belong. Then she saw him. Julian was standing near the elevator, talking to his assistant. He looked different, calm, lighter somehow. When he noticed her, a smile tugged at his mouth. "You came," he said softly. "Still not sure why," she replied. He chuckled. "Because you wanted to make sure I wasn't bossing anyone around again." She smirked. "Something like that." They rode the elevator together, standing a little too close for comfort. So, Harper said, breaking the silence. What exactly am I doing here? Julian glanced at her. We're launching a community partnership. I need someone who can help me understand what people actually want, not what my team thinks they want. She raised an eyebrow. And you think a waitress knows that? I think you're the only person who told me the truth, he said simply. That quiet honesty between them returned, the one that didn't need fancy words. The next few days were different. Harper joined meetings, sat beside Julian during presentations, helped his team design outreach events for local families. First, they clashed. You can't just throw money at people, she told him one afternoon, flipping through a brochure draft. It's not about throwing money, he argued. It's about showing support. Then show up, she said, meeting his gaze. Talk to them. Listen. You keep trying to fix things with a check when what they need is a person. He fell silent, then nodded slowly. You're right. Again. She grinned. I should start charging for that. Bit by bit, Julian started changing. He spent time walking through town, talking to small business owners, even visiting the diner again, this time just to listen. Harper watched him one afternoon as he stood in front of a group of kids at the local rec center, helping set up computers. He looked happy, and it scared her, because the more she saw this version of him, humble, kind, human, the harder it became to keep her walls up. One evening, after a long day, Julian offered her a ride home. You sure? She asked. It's out of your way. I don't mind, he said. Besides, it's freezing out. They drove through quiet Ohio streets, passing Christmas lights and gas stations glowing against the cold. The heater hummed softly. Harper looked out the window. You ever miss simple things? He glanced over. Like what? Like stopping somewhere because you want to, not because it's planned. Or not having to be Mr. Cross all the time. He smiled faintly. Every day. Then why don't you? He hesitated. Because I forgot how. Her heart ached a little at that. Maybe it's time to remember. He glanced at her again, eyes soft. Maybe you're right. When they reached her apartment, she thanked him quietly. Hey Harper, he said before she got out. Yeah. You make this whole world feel smaller. In a good way. She froze, unsure how to respond. Good night, Julian. Good night. As she walked up the steps, her chest felt warm and heavy, because deep down, she knew what was happening, and it terrified her. Over the next few days, they grew closer. Long talks turned into shared jokes. Arguments turned into understanding. But the tension grew too, unspoken, careful, fragile. At the office one afternoon, Julian found her standing by the window, staring at the snow. You okay? He asked. Yeah, she said softly. Just thinking. About what? She hesitated. About how weird this is. You and me. Different worlds colliding like this. Julian nodded. You're right. It is weird. She gave a small smile. See? We agree on something. He stepped closer, his voice low. Maybe weird isn't bad. The air between them stilled. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Harper stepped back, breaking the spell. Don't do that. Do what? Make it harder than it already is. Julian's expression softened. I'm not trying to. Then don't, she whispered. And before he could say another word, she walked out of the room. That night, Julian stayed in his office long after dark. He looked at the empty chair she'd been sitting in, the half-drunk coffee cup she'd left behind. He didn't know what they were. Friends, co-workers, something more. But he knew one thing, he didn't want it to end. Have you ever been stuck with someone who made you feel too much, even when you tried not to? Tell me what happened. Snow fell heavier that week, coating the streets of Maple Hill, Ohio in quiet white. Inside Cross Technologies, the hum of work carried on. But between Julian and Harper, something had shifted. Started small. Less laughter. More pauses. They still met every morning. Still sat across from each other during project updates. But now the air between them was charged. Not angry, not cold, just full. Every time their hands brushed over the same file, Harper pulled back too quickly. Every time Julian spoke, He caught her watching him like she was trying to figure out how close was too close. And then one afternoon, everything cracked. They were reviewing community proposals in Julian's office. The walls of glass overlooked the snowy city. "This plan doesn't make sense," Harper said, flipping through a stack of papers. "You're promising scholarships, but no one's explained how people apply. There's no system." Julian rubbed his temples. "I'll have my team fix it." "No," she said sharply. "That's the problem. You keep saying my team like you're not part of it. You should talk to them, to people." He looked up, his voice edged. "I am talking to you, aren't I?" She froze. "That's not the same." "Then what is, Harper? You want me to hold everyone's hand?" "That's not how this works." Her jaw tightened. "Maybe that's why nothing feels real to you." The words hit him harder than she knew. Julian stood, pacing toward the window. "You think you know me that well already?" "I know walls when I see them," she said quietly. "I've lived behind mine long enough." He turned, meeting her eyes. "And what about yours? You push everyone away before they can leave, don't you?" Her breath caught. He saw the hurt flicker across her face and instantly regretted it. "Harper, I didn't mean." "Yes, you did," she said, cutting him off. "And you're right." Silence filled the room, heavy and raw. Harper gathered her things, her voice low but steady. "You know, Julian, for someone so smart, you sure don't know how to let anyone in." He didn't stop her when she walked out. But when the elevator doors closed, he realized it wasn't anger he felt. It was fear. Fear that he'd just driven away the only person who'd ever seen him. Harper didn't go to work the next morning. She stayed home with her son, Eli, making pancakes and pretending not to think about him. But the truth was, she couldn't stop. Julian Cross, the man who'd started as a stranger shouting in her diner, had become something she didn't know how to name. He'd seen her strength, her exhaustion, her fire, and instead of walking away, he'd stayed. Until now. Eli tugged on her sleeve. "Mom, you okay?" She smiled faintly. "Yeah, baby. Just thinking." He grinned. "About that fancy man who came to the diner?" Her heart skipped. "What makes you say that?" "You smiled when you said his name." She looked away, hiding her blush. "Eat your pancakes, kid." Across town, Julian sat in his office staring at an empty chair. He hadn't realized how quiet the place could feel without her voice echoing through it. Her words replayed in his head like a song he couldn't turn off. "Maybe that's why nothing feels real to you." He leaned back, closing his eyes. She was right. Nothing had felt real in years, not the meetings, not the money, not even the success. He missed her honesty, her warmth, the way she reminded him that being powerful didn't mean being cold. So that night, when everyone had gone home, he found himself driving through the snow toward Maple Hill. The diner was dark, closed for the night. But across the street, a small neon sign glowed in the window of a laundromat. He spotted her through the glass, folding clothes with her son. She laughed at something he said, a sound so pure it made his chest ache. Julian didn't go in. He just stood there for a moment, watching quietly. Then he pulled a notepad from his pocket and scribbled a quick note. He slid it under the diner door before driving away. The next morning, Harper opened the diner for her early shift. The air smelled like coffee and fresh muffins. When she bent to unlock the door, she saw it. The folded note, slightly damp from melted snow. She opened it slowly. "You were right. I've spent my life trying to be heard, but I never learned how to listen. I don't want to be that man anymore. Julian." Her hands trembled slightly as she read it again. Then, without thinking, she smiled, small but real. She tucked the note into her apron pocket and went back to work, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. A few days later, Cross Technologies held its first community event, a winter drive for local families. Harper showed up quietly, unsure if she should. Julian was there, talking to volunteers. When he spotted her across the room, his eyes softened. He walked over, stopping just a few feet away. "Did you get my note?" he asked. "I did," she said softly. "You actually listened." "I'm learning," he replied. Harper smiled. "Guess you really don't shout anymore." Julian chuckled. Not since someone taught me how to speak like a person again. They stood there for a long moment, surrounded by people and laughter, but it felt like the world had gone quiet around them. Still, Harper didn't let herself fall all the way in. Not yet. She turned slightly, her voice calm. Just don't forget, Julian. People like me don't live in your world. He looked at her, sincerity in his eyes. Then maybe I'll come live in yours for a while. She laughed. Soft, surprised, almost shy. You wouldn't last a week. Try me, he said. For a second, they both smiled, but the weight in their eyes said this wasn't over. There were still walls to climb, wounds to face, truths to uncover. But for the first time, both of them seemed willing to try. You ever meet someone who made you see yourself a little clearer, even when it hurt? If you have, you know what comes next. Stay with this story. Some truths deserve to be heard all the way through. The truth has a way of finding light, even when you've buried it in the dark. The next few weeks moved like the slow thaw of winter. Harper and Julian worked side by side again, careful but close, the kind of closeness that comes with unspoken understanding. The community project was thriving. Volunteers filled the conference rooms, families came in with stories, and for once, Julian's building didn't feel like just another office tower. But where there's light, shadows wait. One afternoon, Harper came in early and caught voices down the hall. Julian's assistant, Claire, stood in the doorway to his office, whispering sharply into her phone. Yes, he's serious about her, Claire said. But it's ridiculous. She's a waitress, not a partner. He's losing focus. Harper froze. She didn't hear the rest, just the words that stuck like splinters. He's serious about her. She's a waitress. She walked quietly into Julian's office, her face calm but her eyes cold. He looked up, smiling. Hey, you're early. I was just about to. Is that what they think of me here? She asked softly. A distraction? Julian blinked, confused. What? I heard Claire, she said, voice trembling now. She said you're serious about me, but that I'm just, what, a waitress? Something beneath you. Julian stood. Harper, you know that's not how I see you. But that's how your people do. And you didn't stop them. I didn't even know she said that, he argued. That's the problem, Harper said. You don't know. You don't see how different our worlds are. I can't keep pretending it doesn't matter. Harper, please, Julian said quietly. We're not our titles. I don't care about that. She looked away. Maybe you don't, but everyone around you does. And sooner or later, that'll break us apart. Her voice cracked on the last word, and Julian's chest tightened. That night, the snow came back, falling heavy over the city. Julian sat in his penthouse staring at the skyline, her words echoing in his head. He'd spent his life fighting to be respected, to be the man who had control. But now, none of it felt worth it if it meant losing the one person who made him human again. He grabbed his coat and drove through the storm. When he reached her apartment, the lights were still on. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time and knocked softly. Harper opened the door, surprised to see him standing there in the snow. Julian, what are you? I had to see you, he interrupted, breathless. You were right. I've been so focused on fixing problems that I didn't see the one standing right in front of me. She crossed her arms, defensive. And what problem is that? Me, he said simply. I thought being powerful meant keeping my walls up. But all it did was keep everyone out, including you. Her eyes softened for a second, but she shook her head. Julian, this isn't just about walls. It's about reality. You'll wake up one day and realize I don't belong in your world. Then I'll build a new one, he said quietly. For a long moment, they just stood there, snow melting off his coat, her eyes glistening under the warm hallway light. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. You can't keep saying things like that, Julian. Not if you don't mean them. I do mean them, he said, his voice low. Every word. She stared at him for a heartbeat longer, then slowly closed the door. The next morning, Harper didn't show up at work. Julian walked into the office and felt the weight immediately. Her empty desk, her quiet laughter missing from the halls. He called her cell. Straight to voicemail. Hours passed. Then Claire walked in, eyes uneasy. "Sir, there's something you need to see." She handed him a small envelope, left at the front desk with his name on it. He opened it and his stomach dropped. "Julian, thank you for everything. But this isn't my world, and I can't keep trying to fit into it. Please don't look for me. Harper." Julian sat back, gripping the note so tight it crumpled. He'd been warned by her, by life, that pride had a cost. And this was it. That night he went back to the diner. The place where they'd first met, where the shouting had turned into something deeper. He sat in her booth, ordered her favorite coffee, and stared out at the snow-covered parking lot. The waitress behind the counter asked, "You waiting for someone?" Julian smiled faintly. "Yeah, I guess I am." Hours passed, and the snow kept falling. He didn't move, didn't leave. Somewhere across town, Harper sat on her couch holding Eli close. She told him they might be moving again soon. Somewhere quiet, somewhere new. But as her son fell asleep in her lap, she looked at the note she'd almost thrown away. His note, the one from weeks ago. "I don't want to be that man anymore." Her hand brushed the words again and again. She whispered into the quiet room, "Then prove it. Have you ever lost someone because you were too afraid to believe they could change? Tell me, did they ever come back?" 3 days passed, then 4. The snow outside Maple Hill finally began to melt, but inside both of them, the cold stayed. Julian barely showed up at his office. His assistant tried to fill the silence, but he'd lost the fire that once drove him. All he could think about was how quickly he'd ruined something that had felt real for the first time in years. At night, he'd sit in his car outside the diner, headlights off, just staring. It had become a kind of confession booth, a place to sit with what he'd done wrong. One night, he whispered to himself, "You wanted someone who'd tell you the truth, and when she did, you let her walk." He didn't realize someone was watching. Inside the diner, Harper stood by the counter, wiping down tables before closing. Through the window, she saw him, that same silver car parked under the streetlight, engine off. Her heart ached, but she didn't move. For days, she'd been wrestling with herself, between what she felt and what she feared. Julian Cross wasn't like anyone she'd ever met. He'd seen her, listened to her, changed for her. But part of her still wondered, was it real? Or was she just another challenge he wanted to win? That question followed her home, into her dreams, into every quiet moment. Until one afternoon, a knock came at her door. When she opened it, Mrs. Riley, the diner owner, stood there with a small envelope. "This came for you," she said. "A delivery guy dropped it off. No name, but I think you'll know who it's from." Harper's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a short letter, written in Julian's unmistakable handwriting. "Harper, I've spent my life fixing things with money, not honesty. But you taught me that real change doesn't come from control. It comes from courage. Tomorrow we're opening the new community center in your neighborhood. It was your idea. It should be you there, not me. If you come, I'll be waiting. Julian." Harper read it 3 times. She didn't know if she was ready to see him, but she knew one thing. If she didn't go, she'd regret it for the rest of her life. The next day, the sky was clear and pale blue. The air still carried a winter chill, but sunlight warmed the sidewalks. At the edge of town, a crowd had gathered outside a new brick building with a sign that read, Maple Hill Community Resource Center. It was simple, welcoming, just like she'd imagined when she pitched the idea months ago. Julian stood by the entrance, talking to a group of volunteers. He looked different, not in clothes or posture, but in spirit. There was a quiet humility in him now. When he saw Harper approaching, everything around him seemed to stop. She walked up slowly, hands in her coat pockets. "You actually built it," she said softly. "You dreamed it," he replied. They stood there in silence for a moment as families passed them, entering the new center. Children laughed in the distance, and the smell of fresh paint mixed with winter air. "I didn't come here for you," Harper said finally. "I came to see what you did with the idea." Julian nodded. "Fair enough. He glanced at her, his voice low. "But I am glad you came." She looked at him then, really looked. His eyes weren't guarded anymore. They were tired, open, honest. He turned toward the crowd. "You know, I almost canceled this event," he said quietly. "It didn't feel right without you here." "Why?" she asked. "Because you're the reason this place exists," he said. "You reminded me who this company was supposed to help in the first place. I forgot that somewhere along the way." Her eyes softened. "You didn't forget. You just stopped believing it mattered." Julian exhaled, the truth of her words settling deep. "And you started making me believe again." For a long moment, neither spoke. Harper looked out at the families laughing and smiling. Then she said, almost to herself, "You know what the hardest part about caring is?" "What?" "It makes you vulnerable," she said quietly. "It makes you want things you don't think you deserve." Julian's voice was soft. "Maybe that's how you know it's real." He turned away, walking toward the small stage where the ribbon cutting was about to happen. Harper stayed back, blending into the crowd. As he gave his short speech, his words were simple, nothing about profits, nothing about numbers. Just people, hope, change. "Sometimes," he said, "you meet someone who shows you the kind of person you want to be. And if you're lucky enough to realize it before it's too late, you don't let pride stop you." The crowd applauded. Harper felt her throat tighten. She didn't know what was next for them, but she knew this moment mattered. After the event, she started to leave quietly. But before she reached her car, she heard his voice. "Harper." She turned. Julian stood a few steps away, holding something in his hand, her old diner apron. He smiled faintly. "I stopped by the diner last week. Mrs. Riley said you might want this back." Harper took it slowly, running her fingers over the faded fabric. "I thought you didn't do sentimental," she teased. "I don't," he said. "Until you." For the first time in weeks, she laughed. It wasn't loud or long, just soft and real. Then Julian said, "I'm not asking you to come back to my world, Harper. I'm asking if you'll let me stay in yours." Her smile faded, replaced by something gentler. "You sure you're ready for that?" He nodded. "For you?" "Yeah." They stood there under the cold sunlight, words fading, something unspoken hanging between them. Harper tucked the apron under her arm. "Then show me, Julian. Don't tell me. Show me." And with that, she turned and walked away. But this time he didn't feel like she was leaving. He felt like she was giving him a chance to follow. For a moment, Julian watched her disappear into the crowd. Then he smiled, small, certain, full of hope. He wasn't the man she'd met months ago in that coffee shop. This time he wasn't shouting. He was listening. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing love anyway. Spring came early that year. The snow melted into quiet puddles, and the first flowers began to bloom along Main Street in Maple Hill. The town looked softer, like it was finally exhaling after a long winter. Julian hadn't seen Harper in weeks, but her presence still lingered everywhere. In the community center she'd inspired, in the laughter of the families who came every day, even in the way he spoke to his employees now. He'd changed, and not because he had to, because he wanted to. He'd stopped measuring success in money. Now it was in faces, smiles, the kind of thank you that didn't need words. Still, some nights, when the office lights went out, he caught himself glancing at the door, half hoping she'd walk in, teasing him like before. But she never did. Then one Friday evening, as the city sky turned gold, Julian left work early and drove toward the diner. The same diner where it had all begun. The place looked different now. Freshly painted walls, new neon sign. But when he stepped inside, the familiar warmth hit him like memory. Harper was behind the counter, tying her apron. For a moment, she didn't notice him. Then she looked up and froze. "Julian." He smiled. "Hey, stranger." She crossed her arms, but her lips twitched with a smile. "What brings you here?" "Another lecture on customer service." He chuckled. "No shouting this time, I promise." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You actually remember that?" "Every word," he said. The diner was quiet that evening. just a few regulars in the corner, and the sound of an old country song playing low through the speakers. Julian sat at the counter while she poured him coffee. "I hear the community center's doing well," she said, leaning on the counter. "Better than I hoped," he said. "We just added a program for single parents, your idea." Her eyes lit up. "You remembered." "I remember everything you say," he replied. She looked down, hiding a shy smile. "You always know what to say, don't you?" He shook his head. "Not always. Most of the time, I just hope I'm saying the right thing." Harper took a breath. "So why are you here, Julian?" He looked around, the coffee mugs, the smell of bacon, the hum of the fridge, all the little things that made this place hers. "Because I realized something," he said softly. "It wasn't just the job I missed. It wasn't just the center. It was you. You made me remember what being alive feels like." Her hands stilled. "I messed up," he continued. "I let fear and pride tell me that we couldn't work because we're from different worlds. But the truth is, I don't care about any of that. I just care about you." Harper blinked back sudden tears. "Julian, you don't know what you're asking for. My life's messy. I don't have time for—" He cut her off gently. "I'm not asking for perfect, Harper. I'm asking for real." The diner door chimed as a customer came in, an older man asking for coffee. Harper nodded and went to pour him a cup, trying to steady her breathing. Julian waited quietly. When she came back, she said softly, "You're serious, aren't you?" "More than I've ever been about anything," he said. She studied him, the man who'd once shouted across a counter, who now looked at her like she was the most important thing in the room. "You really did change," she whispered. He smiled. "I had a good reason to." A few weeks later, Harper found herself at the community center again, this time volunteering with Eli. Julian had invited them to help with a reading event for kids, and Harper couldn't say no. Partly for her son, partly because she missed the way Julian looked at her when she wasn't pretending not to notice. Eli sat on the floor with a group of kids, reading Charlotte's Web out loud, while Julian stood in the back, watching quietly. Harper turned to him. "You're good with them," she said. He smiled. "They don't care who you are. They just want you to show up." She nodded. "Yeah, that's all anyone really wants." For a moment, they stood side by side, the air between them calm. Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A silver key. "What's that?" she asked. He handed it to her. "It's a spare. For the community center. I figured you'd want access since you basically built this place." Harper took it, eyes shining. "Julian, this is—" "A thank you," he said quietly, "for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself." She smiled. "You always did have a dramatic way of saying thank you." He laughed. "Guilty." As the sun set, the center emptied out. Harper and Julian stayed behind, helping clean up. When they finished, he turned to her and said, "Can I show you something?" She nodded. He led her outside, around the side of the building. There, under a soft streetlight, was a new wooden bench. A small metal plate was fixed to it. It read, "For the ones who taught us to listen." Harper's breath caught. "It's for you," he said softly. "And for everyone like you, the people who make noise when the world tries to quiet them." Tears welled in her eyes. "Julian." He took a small step closer. "You told me once that courage isn't shouting louder. It's choosing to love, even when it's hard. I didn't understand that until you." She smiled through tears. "You really listened." He nodded. "For once in my life I did." And then, for the first time, she didn't pull away when he reached for her hand. They stood there for a while, hand in hand, the night air cool and gentle around them. The streetlight flickered, and the sounds of laughter from inside drifted out. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was two people who had finally stopped running from themselves and found each other in the process. Julian looked at her, eyes soft. "You know, I still remember what you said that first day." She laughed. "You mean when I told you to stop shouting?" He grinned. "Yeah, best thing anyone's ever said to me." Weeks later, the diner hung a new picture on the wall. A photo from the community center opening. Harper, Julian, and Eli standing side by side, smiling. Underneath it, a handwritten note. Sometimes you meet someone who changes everything. Not with money, not with power, but with heart. Every customer who saw it smiled. Most didn't know the full story, but the ones who did, they felt it. One evening, long after the diner closed, Harper locked the doors and found Julian waiting by the curb. "You're late," she teased. He shrugged, smiling. "You're worth waiting for." They started walking down the quiet street, the city lights glowing in the distance. "Where to?" she asked. "Anywhere you want," he said. She laughed softly. "Careful, I might hold you to that." "I hope you do," he replied. And as they disappeared down Main Street together, their hands brushed once, twice, before finally staying there. This time, no shouting, no walls, just peace. You ever notice how love doesn't always show up loud? Sometimes it just walks in quietly and stays? If you believe some stories deserve a second chance, stick around. There's more to tell. Do you believe some people are worth the wait? Drop a red heart in the comments if the story hit you. And never stop believing in quiet love. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.